Landscapes of the Soul is the book we just put out. Attachment Theory and Spiritual Formation is the intersection. It's what we're talking about. But why should spiritual directors read this book? What might they get out of it? And how might it help their work or possibly help their directees? That's what we're talking about today on this special launch episode of the Attaching to God podcast. Our guest today is no stranger to the podcast. It is Summer Gross Joy. She is an Anglican priest, a retreat leader, spiritual director. She is also associate faculty of the Spiritual Formation and the Art of Spiritual Direction at the Healing Care Ministries Spiritual Direction School. And she joined us for last year's Attaching to God Summit, which was such a delight. And she recently wrote a book called The Emmanuel Promise, Discovering the Security of a Life Held by God, which talks about attachment quite a bit. Welcome back, Summer.
Thank you so much, Geoff. I'm so appreciative for all the work that you and Sid are doing. And I just hear about it from so many different friends who are even taking your D-Min program. And I'm always asking them after they come back, so what did you learn this time? And a joy.
Yeah, we just finished a cohort seminar last week with someone that you know, and so that was a lot of fun. So, but you're not a stranger to this attachment stuff. We talked to Monica Maurer, who's a therapist, and she knows all about attachment and working with clients, and the book was really helpful to her. But you've been in and around this stuff, and I'd love to kind of hear your reactions of Landscapes of the Soul. So that's the book, obviously, for all of you listeners. But first, can you tell us how you've gotten into like your own work that you do as spiritual direction with individuals, but also with groups and the other things you do?
Yeah. So I got a spiritual direction certificate about 8 years ago after being a pastor for 10 years, pastor in a church with my husband. We co work just like you and Sid co work now. We had the privilege of doing that for 10 years and had the experience of watching people struggle in our congregation, just the stuck in resentment or stuck in an old story, and became passionate about learning about inner healing. How could we practically come alongside people in helping them to experience God breaking in his resurrection life, pulling them up. Have you ever seen that icon, Geoff? It's the
Mm.
resurrection icon, and
Oh, I
sometimes it's
love it.
called the harrowing of hell. It's just my
Mm.
favorite, in which the resurrected Christ is pulling up Adam and Eve out of their caskets
Hmm.
and bringing them
I
into
have one on
life.
the wall. I can
Oh,
look
you're
at it
kidding.
right now while I'm looking at you. Yeah. And I love it because there's like, it kind of looks like he's floating in the air, but then there's these two boards and they're actually the doors of hell, right? That he's standing on, that he's kind of blown the hinges off of. And then some pictures have just kind of like manacles and chains that are just kind of like cast off, right? I love it. It's so great.
If not
Yeah, I
Satan
love it.
himself being chained in there, or
Exactly. Yep.
death himself being chained.
Yes.
Yeah. So we were watching our people stuck in death in different ways, and wanting to see the resurrected life, Christ, break into their lives and pull them out of their places of death. So we had the privilege of going to Healing Care Ministries, learning from Terry Wardle and Ann Halley. And Ann was teaching on attachment even back then. I think that was 12, 14, 15 years ago that she was teaching on attachment. I just saw her last week and she's doing well, uh, and teaching still in our spiritual direction school. But at that time, she was teaching on attachment and doing attachment interviews with her
Mm.
spiritual direction clients to understand more about their early stories, so that she may be able to understand what she calls our book of love, which would
Mm.
help her to understand how people are looking through their book of love at God through that lens. So Anne Halley has done beautiful work, and I know that she was Kurt Thompson's spiritual director for a period of time as well. So she's touched a lot of our lives.
Oh, that's great. That's so nice. So how has learning about attachment then kind of and I love that idea of looking through the book of love. I know Dr. Todd Hall, he talks about attachment
Hmm.
filters, and then of course we talk about these different landscapes that we kind of see all of life through. But how has that helped you either personally or on helping those people on resurrection journeys? How's this attachment stuff kind of been important for you?
First, it's been huge in my own life, of course, in how the Lord has walked into some stories that were closed and stifled, and where I needed Him to rescue me from those places. Um, and and to find me as uh, a daughter who needed attachment with her new Abba father. So that was the
Mm.
big aha moment for me is talking to some friends who had adopted children and their own experience of trying to walk with them into an attachment bond and then realizing, oh, our God has adopted us, and yet we still see him as far away and needing to be placated by rules in order to be loved. And I'm just really grateful for this lens of attachment in which I could start to see that kind of the holes or um, the cracks in my own attachment, secure attachment, in order to be invited into, as you call it, the safe pasture and life with God. Um, so first of all, it's been super helpful in my own life. And then, second, understanding where people have come from in their own attachment journey has helped me to understand the majority of people who have some really warped images of God. And that's my work,
Mm.
is really
Yeah.
how do we invite the true God, our um, God as He reveals Himself through Scripture, into the present moment of our
Mm.
lives, even when that present moment doesn't seem pretty good. And because of that, because so many of us are living in difficult circumstances, we need to know that we have a God who joins us in that place and who is safe and loving. And as you say, also challenging to meet us there, to be with us there, and also to move us. And that's honestly, I loved your lenses, but I also loved the invitation to see God as one who not just meets us, but one who moves us as well.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that felt like I think I may have touched on pieces of that just a little bit, but you explored that so much more. And it was such a joy to read those portions uh, and to be challenged in that way. That was exciting.
Oh, thank you. Well, um, the the kind of I guess, and maybe you touched on it with that word challenge in the meeting and moving, because a lot of the attachment kind of literature that we were kind of going through, and certainly the popular ones, would talk about secure attachment comes about through sometimes being seen and soothed and being,
Safe and secure,
made
the 4
secure. Yeah, safe,
4
yeah, the four
S's,
S's. So that comes from Dan
right?
Siegel, and Kurt Thompson talks about it. And that's all true. But, there's this other part that we were really trying to emphasize, which is something like um, that secure attachment also requires this kind of exciting or excitable or kind of expanding kind of energy. So it's not just that when we're in distress that we need to be soothed and seen and brought to safety, which is true, right? And people who have been traumatized, they need to start there, definitely. But there's also the side of the attachment where it's like we're built to kind of also go out and to explore, and that parents kind of can be those who challenge and kind of give energy or like encourage.
Hmm,
And encourage is like a really good word because it means in, which is to kind of
hmm,
like the prefix there is to kind of do with or to kind of to give it, and then the courage is to build the courage, right? So you're actually giving your child
hmm,
courage so that they can do things. You're encouraging them. So, so I'm glad that you kind of latched onto that the meeting and moving is kind of like it's both the care and the challenge is kind of how we talk about it.
mhm. Well, this is how I see that in my spiritual direction practice.
Okay.
How I see the need for that in my spiritual direction practice. A lot of folks will come to me and say, I have these whole periods of time where I'm not thinking about God at all. I have
Mhm.
these whole periods of time where I'm engrossed in my work or in my to-do list or in the people around me, and I feel bad. I feel shame that I'm not thinking about God all that time. And one
Mhm.
of the things that I appreciated from other attachment literature as well was the importance of, when a child feels secure, they move out and they're creative and they're engrossed in their play. They
Right.
know that they're
Right.
safe. They know that they carry within them, as some say, they carry within them the smile, they carry within them the care. And so they're free to go out and
Mhm.
explore in order to come back at times, but they're able to be completely engrossed in what's giving them joy and exploring. And that's a part of early childhood development to be able
Right.
to
Right.
go out and explore. And so I loved what you did, um, spending more time on the invitation of God, and I think it fills God out even more uh, to how He reveals Himself to one who meets us, but also one who challenges us. But the challenge is not outside of His love and care.
Right. Right.
It
That's right.
the exploration that we're invited to do is within His care, and that I think we see
Mhm.
that, let's look for a second at, Matthew and Jesus sending out the disciples, and He doesn't go with
Mhm.
them.
Mhm. Right.
He
Right.
invites them to go, and then when they come back, the Greek says he jumps for joy.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, and that's what we talk about that in one of the later chapters about how, I think it's in Mark's gospel that says it, when he called the 12 disciples, he called them, and then the two main verbs are that they would be with
Mm,
him and that he would be sending them out.
mm, mm.
And so those are the two kind of, and so before we jumped on and started recording, you said that the themes of like intimacy and independence kind of stood out to you.
Yes.
So we could jump there, but that was the idea that Jesus is calling his disciples to be intimate with them, but he also gives them lots of opportunity for
Mhm,
independence, not against
mhm.
God or from God, but in alongside Jesus, and he sends them out on mission. So, and then they come back a little freaked out, and then they keep growing. It's that whole growing and learning
Mhm.
process for sure. But you said intimacy and independence kind of stood out. Could you just kind of talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, because of, Brother Lawrence and practicing the presence of God,
Yeah.
and the idea of being tuned in to the fact that there is a God who is tuned in to us at all times, and that takes practice. I do believe it takes practice, and I believe it's part of the movement for some of us. I'm not saying for all of
Mhm.
us, but I think for a lot of us, it's a part of kind of the exercise or the challenge of practicing that intimacy. But then there's that invitation to go out and explore in the independence. So I came from a more of an anxious attachment. So the jungle, as you guys talked about it, I thought your lenses were fantastic. With the desert being a place of just knowing all the rules of the landscape and protecting oneself um, and having logic be the major rule. um, but
Mhm.
then the jungle of all of these relationships and connections, and can I figure these people out? And believing that you have to be the first one to understand them, and if you didn't, um then um you lost somehow, or you're in fight or flight, just not knowing how to interact with that jungle um, atmosphere. Um, but I think those of us that came from an anxious attachment struggle with um, being able to move out in independence, whether or not we have the connection that we crave. And I just have to admit that that is a very real thing for me even today, and something that I have to push through on the regular, and to ask myself, is is this what I'm being called to do? Even if it feels so horrible, because there are, different folks that don't see it the same way. So I have to
Yeah.
struggle through that, um, recognizing that sometimes there's times for independence rather than for intimacy. And so, man, that was super empowering. Geoff, I
Oh,
felt
good.
super empowered, as someone, who has an anxious attachment, to really explore that other area.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of our logic between, just for listeners who haven't read the book. If you're familiar with attachment language, oftentimes there's these like, two poles or two capacities. It's like one's the anxious kind of, and then the other one's the avoidant. Like, how anxious are you in a relationship, and how avoidant, and then you get this like attachment score. And we kind of heard from people. We felt like, that could be very kind of shaming, and it doesn't really give you a goal to work toward. Like, oh, I just need to become less anxious, or I need to become less avoidant. And so, going through the research, we came across like, well, the opposites is really kind of intimacy and independence. Is that we're supposed to have both of those capacities. And I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but someone who's kind of in the anxious kind of zone of the jungle, they would be much more high capacity for intimacy, but a little lower on the independence. And then someone in the desert would have much higher capacity for independence. They love being on their own, but they're not very skilled. And so that's kind of the language we used about Jesus meeting and moving, is that, well, Jesus will meet you in your
Hmm.
high intimacy, but then he'll also kind of move you toward flexing that independence muscle
Mhm.
more. But I, as someone from the desert, I have to do the opposite. Is I have a pretty high independence. I love my to-do lists. I will get stuff done. Um, uh, but I had, Jesus meets me there, uh, in the Bible study and the doctrine and the kind of big heady kind of things. But then he's also trying to move me toward the integration of like, hey, you need to flex that intimacy
Mhm.
muscle a little bit more. And so that's been really helpful for me. I don't know if that was kind of along the line of
Yes.
what you were saying
Yeah,
too.
definitely. Yeah. It reminds me of Friedman and he's the one who wrote Generation to
Mm.
Generation, but he also wrote another book on failure, and I'm not gonna remember the whole type of title, but failure of leadership or failure.
Is it The Failure of Nerve
Yeah,
or
yes,
something like
yes,
that?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that, um, it's that skill set that you're talking about of independent despite what the rest of the DNA of the structure or um, the church structure um, or corporation structure or whatever, being able to have the integrity to stay in
Mhm.
this independent space where you believe that this is what you are being called to. But we see that in Jesus, that mission that he had moving towards Jerusalem. And sometimes he would say to people uh, that he was done healing because it was time
Yeah.
for him to move. To that happened
Yeah.
after healing Peter's mother-in-law, um, and a lot of people showed up for healing and deliverance. And then the next morning, he listened to the Lord, and the Lord's like, it's time to move, even though there was a lot of need right there. So that
Yeah.
kind of focus and ability to be independent um, is vital. So yeah, I see the need for both of these things and honestly see them in the church. How do we form bodies that have both of these skill sets side by side? That's one of the
Mhm.
questions that I felt like you were asking in your book as well.
Yeah, well, the church question is kind of like, oh, if we had time to write another
Yeah,
book.
there we
But
go.
but
There's
it
your
really
next
I
one.
yeah, it could be. We to kind of use the care and challenge language, like I think you're right. I think some church environments are really good at creating a caring
Mhm,
environment where people feel seen and soothed and safe, and uh, there's a lot of attunement, relational attunement going on. But then maybe sometimes there's a little lower challenge, and then you other churches are kind of the opposite. It's very high challenge. Maybe it's um, you know like they have really clear ideas of how you should be involved, how to serve, what obedience means to the Lord.
mhm,
Be sure to give this much money, right? But then the care structure often kind of is lacking,
mhm,
whether it's a big church or a small church. People don't necessarily feel nurtured if they fall off the getting things done kind of wagon of that high challenge environment. Then they kind of feel lost or unable to contribute.
mhm,
So yeah, our kind of hope is that the attachment language can help us understand that both of those are essential and that they shouldn't be neither one should be
mm,
villainized. They're supposed to work
mhm,
together, but I think a lot of times they don't.
mhm.
You find when you're working with clients, who do you find is coming to you? Is it the ones that are kind of from the too high challenge environment and they need more care, or is it a little of both? Like sometimes it's the other direction.
I work with a lot of people who recognize their desire for greater attachment, secure
Mm-hmm.
attachment, and so they're wanting to figure out the different ways that they have made God in the image of often an unhealthy caregiver, and
Sure.
to recognize how that's playing out in their everyday world, their everyday faith. Spiritual direction, as you know, is it's care in the present, is listening to
Mm.
God as the director and creating space for that in the present where therapy is looking at the past and also looking at problem areas, and then
Mm-hmm.
coaching perhaps is looking towards goals in the future. So spiritual direction is really what's happening now in our spiritual life, and how do we invite God or um, listen to his invitation that he's already sending to either to intimacy or to challenge as well. Sometimes there is a challenge. It's time to I'm stuck right here. It's time to forgive, or I'm grieving. It's time to lament. There's a real challenge there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as our time is kind of coming to an end, is there any last things that have stood out about Landscapes of the Soul, the book, or just about attachment that you're just wanting to share as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think we've moved through kind of where I am in the book, honestly. I loved looking ahead at your spiritual practices. That's a piece that's really important to me, and recognizing how different spiritual practices can be a an easy thing for some attachment styles, and a challenge for others. And I just
Hmm.
love that. I think that's really important, that in our lives we have both something that feels like an easy road to God, or kind of like John the Baptist saying, make a way for God to come. But some that feels a little harder, and
Yeah.
the challenge that our soul needs in order to become holy.
Yeah, that's our hope. Our hope for the book is that it would build hope in
Hmm.
people for that connection with God. So I know you have written a great book, The Emmanuel Promise: Discovering Security of a Life Held by God, and you have a bunch of great practices there. We hope that our book, Landscapes of the Soul, will also kind of add to the library of spiritual directors like you. Could you tell some people, just to finish, kind of where people can stay connected with you and the things you're doing? And if you have any special projects, I don't know, do you have another book in the works? Or you have any
I'm
other
playing
things?
now. I'm playing,
Okay.
and one of them is, um, a Lectio Divina journaling method that has been really fruitful for people as well as for myself, and brings a lot of neuroscience in there, and so I'm working with that. That
Oh, good.
might
Can't
become
wait.
a book as well as a journal. But yeah, the Emmanuel promise at the end of each of the chapters, I tried to have uh, some ways for people to interact with the material and with God, to have a Lectio Divina or some other spiritual practice that was a video. People could find me on Instagram at Rev Summer Joy, or uh, find me at patreon.com/the presence project, where I do a lot of teaching and kind of group retreats twice a month, 3 times a month. It's a real joy. We've got yeah, some really fun things coming up this year, in which we're working with the threshold of the last hour of the day, and what
Hmm.
happens in our brain as we are nourished during that time, instead of getting sucked into binge watching something, and allow
Yeah.
ourselves to be nourished during that last hour. Did you know that our brains wire differently in the last 15 minutes than it does any other time of the day? So
Oh,
that's
like before you
right
fall
before
asleep,
you
you mean?
fall asleep. So that's
Okay.
one of the things that we're going to be playing with in the Presence Project, in a group
Oh,
called Table of the
fun.
Beloved this fall.
Oh, fun. Well, great. Well, I have some of those things. We'll be sure to add that to the show notes. But thank you so much for taking time to read our book. Again, it's Landscapes of the Soul. Thank you for writing your book and all the things that you do. We really appreciate it.